Welcome to Headlines. This is Dovid Lichtenstein. This week we have with us Rabbi Ysoscher Lopatin, the head of Yeshivat Chovevei Torah and the head of the Open Orthodoxy movement. We also have with us Rabbi Avrahom Gordimer, a critic of Open Orthodoxy. We'll have a discussion. You can listen to us Motzei Shabbos from 11 to 12 midnight on WMCA 570 AM or on the Nachum Segal Network Monday morning at 11 a.m. at NachumSegal.com. You can find all our shows at headlinesbook.com under the audio podcast section. We now have a new hotline with all our previous shows, 732-806-8700. You can email us always at info@headlinesbook.com. Well, Open Orthodoxy has obviously been, something very hot, very discussed, and this show, I wasn't sure whether to have it or not. I actually got permission for both the Novominsk Rebbe and Reb David Cohen. So I'm going to be very unjudgmental and allow the listeners to make their own choices.
We have on the phone with us Rabbi Ysoscher Lopatin, who is the president of Yeshivat Chovevei Torah in Riverdale. He was previously the leader of Anshe Shalom in Chicago, and actually the rabbi of the current mayor of Chicago. He's a graduate of Boston University. In 1989, he got a Master of Philosophy from Oxford. Additionally, he's a Rhodes Scholar and a Truman Scholar and a member of Phi Beta Kappa, probably one of the most accomplished, degreed people I've ever interviewed. Additionally, he's a musbach of Reb Aaron Soloveitchik. Welcome, Rabbi Lopatin.
Thank you. It's good to be on your show.
So, Rabbi Lopatin, if you could give us, because a lot of our people are sort of, everything's third hand, can you give us a brief overview of what is Open Orthodoxy?
Great. Well, it'd be my pleasure. What people call Open Orthodoxy really is really just modern Orthodoxy. Maybe it's reclaiming true modern Orthodoxy, and it's really Orthodoxy. And I really feel it's just part of Torah true Yiddishkeit. The term came from Rav Avi Weiss, who, when he was thinking of starting a yeshiva, where people could be open about all their questions and everything could be discussed on the table, he felt the term open was perfect. I do not see it, and the yeshiva doesn't see it as a separate movement or anything like that. It's really just, in some ways, the best way to describe Open Orthodox learning is a method of learning where people feel comfortable and safe to struggle with issues that they face in the contemporary world, to ask the questions, to not be ashamed of offering possible understandings of halacha. But besides that, it's really very much like what you see in any other Orthodox yeshiva, people learning the Chavrusa, Rebbeim, learning from the Rebbeim, using classic sources, and also classic contemporary sources, Rav Yosef, Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Zalman Nechemia Goldberg, all the names that come up as poskim, the Tzitz Eliezer. So all the names from the Gemara to the Rishonim to Acharonim and to today's contemporary poskim, that's what you would hear. And the idea really is that we should not be afraid of the world around us. We should not be afraid of the challenges that the contemporary world, contemporary society, challenge us with. But actually, we should welcome them and feel secure in our Yiddishkeit, secure in our method of learning, and secure that we can face these challenges and thrive with them, and not, instead of hiding from them, really embrace them.
So, Rabbi Lopatin, I went through Avi Weiss's Open Orthodoxy, a Modern Orthodox Rabbi's Creed, which was, would that sort of be the document of Yeshivat Chovevei Torah? Would that be the operative theology behind the yeshiva? I'm referring to what he wrote in 1997.
Yeah, and that really kicked off. The yeshiva is 17 years old. It really kicked it off, and so I think we operate within that theology and within that understanding. I'm not sure that every student that comes in reads that, but yeah, I think that what we're doing at Chovevei is consistent with that theology, with that document, and it's definitely the inspiration for who we are, for our Talmudim. We have 108 Yismachim going out into the world, and I think, yes, it's definitely the inspiration for them.
So the Orthodox world is concerned, and I'm sure you've been reading about it in the press, that there is shinuyim, there are differences that will lead to halachic differences between Orthodoxy and modern Orthodoxy. Can you think of any halachic differences between them?
Well, I think that there are a lot of differences within the Orthodox world in general, and so definitely, let's say, on Yom HaTzma'ut, saying Hallel with a bracha, not saying Tachanun. And the truth is, saying Hallel with a bracha is a major halachic issue. So that's something that, there's a lot of disagreement within. There's shinuyim, some people see that, within Orthodoxy. I would say that a lot of the things that look very different, if we're looking at issues of, attitudes towards women's involvement with learning, with leadership, with even in the services. A lot of them don't involve halachic issues. Attitudes towards people that were normally excluded. For instance, how do you deal with a gay couple that comes to your shul? How do you deal with on college campus? How do you deal with someone on college campus that has issues with their hashkafot and their orthodox? And all these things really, in general, don't involve halacha. They involve much more, definitely Masorah, but they involve also, I would say, almost the aesthetics of Judaism. Like, it looks different. Having a woman give a Dvar Torah in shul, it looks different, it feels different. Having a woman carry a Sefer Torah through the women's section, through the Ezras Nashim, so you still have the Mechitza. And you look up in the Aruch HaShulchan, and it says explicitly that women can touch a Torah, and there's no issue of Nida. So it doesn't involve halacha, but it definitely involves aesthetics. And a lot of it is really community-based, that if you live in a community where women don't even go to shul, or if they do, really, a man would never see a woman in shul, they're behind a very high mechitza, then aesthetically it looks very strange. If you're in a community where women are in shul and women are singing, an Orthodox community where women are singing, women are participating in that way on the other side of the mechitza, just like the men sing, the women sing, and all that, then it doesn't look as strange. So it's really, issues of halacha like kashrus, issues of tarat hamishpacha, really the classic issues of davening, of Shabbos, those issues. I don't think there's really much difference between a modern Orthodox, a progressive Orthodox, a liberal Orthodox, Haredi, but really it's more the aesthetics, I would say.
So let me ask you some issues that are really not halacha, but they go more to hashkafa. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to quote, at random. I spent the last day or so sort of on Facebook going through some of the... So here are some quotes, and I'll tell you who their names are. So because they're not from you, but they're from different members, I guess, who are part of either the Anhala, or I have Rabbi Ysoscher Katz, who is the head of Gemara, I guess, in Halacha at Yeshivat Chovevei Torah. And I also have some from Rabbi Zev Farber, who's a Musmach, and who's a board member of the International Rabbinic Membership. And here are some things that I think that just sort of sound a little bit mechudash, let me say. Here's a quote, okay? This is from Rabbi Farber. Avrahom and Sarah are folkloristic characters, factually speaking. They are not my ancestors or anyone else's. I mean, for somebody to say that Avraham Avinu is not our grandfather, that the Avis, we're not, Alekei Avraham, Alekei Yitzchak, Alekei Yaakov is just a folklore. I think that most Orthodoxy and modern Orthodoxy would have an issue with it. He says these are easily identified. They're ahistorical. They fit into the genre of folklore, allegory, and intentionally fantastic character in order to explain some aspect of the world in which we live. Let me continue. He says that the 12 Shvatim really didn't exist. And he says Yetzias Mitzrayim never occurred. This is all in one large paper that I printed out here from Rabbi Farber. I think most Orthodox would have an issue with saying that we don't come from the Avos.
And I agree with that. I have an issue also with that. First of all, Torah Sinai, Torah Shemayim is a non-negotiable. It's a pillar of Orthodoxy, and we make sure that our students, to get smicha, you have to believe that. It's a free country, but if you want to be part of our our yeshiva, you have to believe that. Second of all, really, these belief in Yetzias Mitzrayim and in the Avos and Himahos, these are I think are basic principles of belief of Yiddishkeit. I think Rabbi Farber, so some things he says I disagree with, and Yeshiva disagrees with, and I really do feel as uncomfortable as you do. I think that he uses a lot of language that if you really sat down with him and really unpacked it, he would say, in some ways, of course, I believe in Yetzias Mitzrayim, but, this whole idea of ahistorical, that, okay, if what I believe is history needs to be proven by actual historic archaeological evidence, okay, then that's one thing. But, how does he know, how does he know for sure it did not happen? Does he have evidence that it did not happen? Yetzias Mitzrayim and everything like that? So, I think that these things, and I turned to the head of Ramah's day school in New York, Rabbi Dr. Eric Grossman, and he says a lot of these sensitive issues when it comes to history, when it comes to how you explain midrashim and how do you understand the pshat of the text with the avos and mahos and with all sorts of things, they need to be handled not in an article that gets put up on Facebook or wherever, but sometimes when someone has fakos, you have to sit with them one-on-one and look at it and discuss different pshatim. The Rashbam might disagree with the Rambam, and Ramban would disagree with the Rambam. So, they have to be handled very sensitively. But I agree with you, and I think that the Chevra at Yeshivat Chovevei Torah and our Rabbanim would be they all believe, I can vouch for them, they all believe in Yetzias Mitzrayim. They all say they daven 3 times a day, and they mean it, and that the avos are our avos. And I think that I share your discomfort with them. And, when a student has questions, it's good to ask those questions. It's good for a student to say, I'm really troubled, but how do we explain Yetzias Mitzrayim when it doesn't fit in with what archaeologists believe or something? Okay, let's sit down and let's talk about it. But it all starts, and it has to be contingent on a belief in our Masoret and our... So
here, Rabbi Lopatin, here's a quote from Rabbi Katz. That was Rabbi Farber. Here's a quote from Rabbi Katz, who's the chair of the Department of Halacha and Gemara, and he says, and this is in a Facebook quote, April 3rd, 2015, he says, biblical fiction. The retelling of the Exodus story is fiction. It is a record of God's conversation with fictionalized characters. I mean,
I think
this is a Rosh Yeshiva there. Could you understand what? In Chovevei, I'm saying, could you think of any yeshiva in our history where Rosh Yeshiva would get up and say, according to the rabbis, the retelling of the Exodus story is fiction, it's biblical fiction, it's a record of God's conversation with fictionalized characters. I mean, he's basically saying, Moshe and Aaron are fictionalized characters too. How does a Rosh Yeshiva get up and say something like that?
Well, first of all, he's one of our Rabbanim. Our Rosh Yeshiva is Dovid Lichtenstein, but he's one of our Chashava Rabbanim, Rabbi Katz, and he's a big Maimin, and I think that the reason it is unique at Chovevei Torah because I don't think Rosh Yeshiva and most of these will talk about what does fiction mean. What does fiction mean? What does literary fiction mean? And it doesn't mean that it's not true. I think that's a very good and that would be a very simple and simplistic understanding of fiction. What he's saying is that, and he said this all along, is that the Torah is not out to be a book of history. It's not that takes it really demeans the Torah when we just use the Torah as a book of history. It's much more significant. So I think when he talks about fiction, he talks about it on a much deeper level. Not that it's not true, not even that it didn't happen or that it's fake or anything chas v'shalom like that, but that it has a deeper message and a deeper import. That the role of Torah is not to teach us historical truth. Yeah, they all happen. That's the role of Torah is much more similar to the literary role of fiction, which goes beyond that. Did it happen? How did it happen? How do historians think it happened? It's much more to teach us important lessons, and that's very traditional.
Given the data to which modern historians have access, it is impossible to regard the account of mass exodus from Egypt or the wilderness experience, Yetzias Mitzrayim or the Midbar, or the coordinated, swift, and complete conquest of the entire land of Canaan under Yeshua as historical. He says it's impossible to see Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Midbar, or even Klishas Haaretz by Yeshua, right, with L'Shaita, Shaloi L'Shlasad Lavai, but he says it's impossible to view it as historical. And this is from a Facebook quote this is the Torah.com, Torah History Judaism Part 5.
Right. Yeah, and I think
these are very difficult things for a rabbi to write. It's impossible to regard it as historical.
So when you face...
He's not saying that it's more than historical. He's saying it's impossible to regard it as historical.
Right. So nothing's impossible. But I wouldn't have written that. But actually, what he's saying is let's get away from feeling compelled to look at these as that it had to have happened. And what he's trying to do is saying I don't care whether historians think it happened. I don't even care whether historians think it's impossible. Fine, let's even grant that they say it's impossible. I want to look for the real meaning of our Torah and why did Yeshua write that and what does it try to teach us? And I think that when you're looking at the scientific world, I think a lot of times we cower to it. And we think that is what's critical, and that it is critical that historically something has happened, from a scientific point of view. And if not, then our whole world will collapse. Our whole Torah world will collapse. And what he is saying is that it doesn't matter. I don't care whether historically this happened in this certain way. What I care about is the message that HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Nevi'im HaKadoshim are teaching us through these writings. So what he's trying to do is really tell Torah-believing Jews, Torah-loving Jews, that really separate. Yes, it's very important. Archaeology is important, and Rav Aaron Soloveitchik taught that you have to Zechor Yemos Olam B'Mishnos Dor Vador. You have to remember history. It's important, but don't think that defines Torah. You don't think that science and history defines Torah, because it doesn't. Torah is way beyond that, and that's really what he's trying to do there.
Okay, so when he writes that it's folklore, allegory, it doesn't really mean that.
Shad, Drash, Remez, and Sod, and folklore, I think that it's important for us to understand. We normally think of folklore as things that didn't happen, as, Baba Mises. And what he's trying to say is let's get beyond, let's elevate that, and let's look. Something, theologians and historians use the term myth. And when we think of myth, it's it's a Baba Mice that never happened. But actually, they put myth, anthropologists put myth on a real high pedestal. this is an underlying myth of the religion. So I think, yeah, the language is sometimes we think of something as folklore as diminishing, and definitely what he wants to do is place it on a higher madrega and beyond.
So when he writes it's impossible, what does he mean when he writes it's impossible to believe it as historical?
I think what he's saying is that if you're following historians and archaeologists and scientific theory, it would seem to be impossible. Now, I'm very much more postmodern than perhaps even, anyone in Yeshiva is. And so I don't put impossible. My father always taught me that new math can say 2 + 2 is 5. So, I don't know how he did that, but I don't like that word impossible. Even when we look at halachot, we have to, we sometimes come up with very surprising things that it's impossible for, the poskim to have ever said this, for the chidah to have said something so radical. I don't like the word impossible, but I think what he means is that if you're following the lead of historians and archaeologists, then it would seem to be impossible. But that's not the lead we follow. We follow Hashem, we follow our Masoret, and we believe in it way michutz, from all the what science tries to really diminish it and sort of enclose our Torah in those kind of terms. We want to go beyond that.
Now, how would you say, Rabbi? Here's some more quotes from Rabbi Zev Farber in a number of different articles.
And I should say, Zev Farber is brilliant. He's very smart, but he doesn't play any role in our yeshiva. I wasn't aware that he was on the board. He's definitely a member of the International Rabbinic Fellowship, and he has every right to his opinion.
And he's also the editor of the journal.
No, we don't. There's no.
The Kerem. It says. That's what it says on his website. Yeah. It says he's the editor of the journal of the Maharat journal Kerem. That's what it says.
Yeah. So Maharat's a wonderful yeshiva, and they train women, but it's not affiliated with Chovevei Torah. So Rabbi Sarah Hurwitz is the dean of that, and so that's a separate thing. That's not. He doesn't edit any journal for Chovevei Torah. And again, he's brilliant. He's wonderful. He's hopeful. I hope that he's addressing a group of more skeptical people, and that it helps with kiruv and helps bring them to the Torah in a very different way. But he's not associated with Yeshiva, and I frankly disagree with much of his writing strongly.
Because there is an online a very warm haskama from the yeshiva to some of the things he says. Right, like if you want, I could.
I would love to see that because I'm only there 3 years, so I haven't cleaned up all the online things. So I would love to see that because we've written that's some of the things that he's written we don't teach. I don't want to really address him, but I've written on the blogs.
Rabbi Lopatin, here are a few quotes. The simplest explanation for the differences between the accounts in Shemais and by Mitzvah Dvarim is they were penned by at least 2 different authors with different conceptions of the desert experience.
Well, always be afraid of when something is simple. Life is not simple, and the simplest understanding is that Hashem can write in any style that Hashem wants to write it. So that's even simpler. So that doesn't resonate with me, and again, I believe that the entire Torah was given at Sinai, Mipi HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and so, and whatever that means, of course, what is the peh of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Hashem doesn't have a mouth, but it was all given by Hashem, so that, I wouldn't agree with that, and I don't think it's so simple to say that.
So, let me go on to the issues of dealing with gays in modern life, which is a very complex issue.
Right.
Now, we would all agree, I think, that in the Torah that we have it, Torah Shebiksav and in Torah Shebal Peh, that Leisishkav and Ish, Mishkevei Isha, is an Issa Daraisa, and it's one of the Chayvei Mises, it's one of the Arayas, in the Parsha of Arayas.
Right. Yes,
so, here's a speech given by a Rav from Chovevei Torah at a LGBT prayer breakfast in Chicago. Here's the exact quote. Rabbeinu Shalom, you instructed us in your wisdom in Sefer Shemais, in Sefer Bereshis, Lo Tov Heyes Adam Levadai.
Oh, that's I could have given that.
Okay.
I don't know.
So Hashem, please bless our public servants. Everyone has the right to seek out the life partner and live in love together with full right with that person. Lo tov heyadas levadai. And based on, basically, within the spirit of this, that the Illinois passed the Religious Freedom and Marriage Fairness Act. This was in Chicago, guaranteeing the right of same-sex couples to marry. And there was a message given out as rabbis, and which I believe Rabbi Lopatin advocated. The statement begins as rabbis, parents, and citizens of Illinois, we want to offer all loving and committed couples in our community the support and protection of having the state recognize their marriage. So I would ask you as follows. I can understand that Orthodox Judaism does not wants to support the separation of church and state. But to come out and say that Lo Tov Heyes Adam Levadai implies that gay marriage should be condoned and is in fact is a good thing, Lo Tov Heyes Adam Levadai, but on the contrary, the Torah supports it. Is that what the Torah means? Lo Tov Heyes Adam Levadai, and at the same time, Ysoscher ish mishkevei isha. I mean, aren't we basically advocating that the Torah sort of has become incorrect at this period of time?
No, chas v'shalom. I mean, I think you have to, if all marriage or really companionship, because I don't know, marriage is a funny word, and we don't have kiddushi between men or women or anything.
But
like
they do have marriage licenses today, which is what the bill supported, right?
Right, because
to make it legal as just as a male-female marriage, not companionship, but to give them all the laws, etc., and a marriage license, which notably, that Clark didn't want, but to give it the same gravitas and legal thing as a male and female marriage. So to say Lo Tov Heyes Adam Levadai and to make a tefillah for it, Rabbeinu Shalom, isn't that?
Right. Well, no, so again, a couple of things. First of all, yes, separation of churches. So if the state, I think, should not actually be recognizing any marriage. It should be civil union, and marriage should be with your religious leader or your spiritual leader.
Yeah, correct.
But if the state is recognizing marriage, then it should not discriminate. And now let's get to the more important issue, which is, is companionship, is a man being with another man. Is that what the Torah is talking about? First of all, Chazal are very clear. They want to say that can we call b'shoferet? We don't have to explain that explicitly, but Chazal were very careful to say the Torah is talking about a certain specific sexual act that's prohibited between men. And if we want to define companionship between two lifelong partners as all about sex and as all about a certain type of sex, then you're right. Making that equation would be right. But I don't think that's what the Torah believes and our tradition believes. And it's not about that. And so to tell a young man or a young woman who cannot connect with a member of the opposite sex, who is homosexual or lesbian or gay, to tell them you have to lead your life, either change your sexual orientation, which we know is very problematic and harmful usually to anyone who attempts it, but or tell them you're going to have to lead your life alone. For the rest of your life, you're not going to have a companion. You're just going to have to lead a lonely life. I think it's wrong, and I think the Torah definitely is saying that that's not what Hashem wants. Hashem wants us, look, if someone wants to be a loner, Tarasu Naso, not get married, fine. But in general, people want that companionship. And I'll tell you, if you look on in Israel, on some of the sites, there are Orthodox organizations, from ones for Orthodox gay men. They talk about the concept of chaver l'chaim.
But do you think when the government is advocating gay marriage, they're talking about platonic gay marriage?
That's what it's not about sex. It's not about the
marriage would not include physical relations. Is that when we talk about marriage, we're talking about? I agree, it's not only about physical relations, but he's saying it's excluding, it's contemplating companionship without physical relationships when we talk about marriage. Let me ask you, would you say the same statement if somebody was in love with their brother or sister and they wanted to get married in incest, and they said, look, this is the only person I love. Would you say the same statement, Lo tov heyos adam levado? It's just another one of the parshas of Arayos, a brother or sister, or a father and a daughter, and we could let them get married, and let's assume that it doesn't allow for relations. Would you make the same statement?
No, I wouldn't. First, because everyone has an opportunity to look in the world and spend their time finding a man, God willing, they're of the opposite sex, if they're a woman, or a woman, and they just need to. Torah wants them to move beyond their sibling, beyond not.
But if they fell in love and they said, "This is the one I love," would we say Lo tov heyos adam levado and assume that the marriage is asexual?
No, I think we wouldn't. I think that's not where we are. And I think that the key thing is it's not about falling in love. It's not that this is the person I fall in love with, because I agree with you there. Let's say someone falls in love with a non-Jewish person. I would say it's usher to marry them. No. We advocate. But it says Lo tov heyos adam levado. Yes, so it's not about find someone you love and marry them and live with them and all its implications. It's about the Torah doesn't want to condemn Adam Harishon to having to live alone. So there has to be an opportunity for people to find a lifelong partner. If someone loves their sister dearly, that's great, but they have an opportunity to find a lifelong partner outside of that. If someone is gay, they should not connect with someone of the opposite sex, because it's very harmful, that kind of relationship. I mean, I don't want to, that's a difficult area to go into, but the idea is not condemning someone exactly what the Torah says. Look, Torah doesn't say, she's chateni mishu, she kachish mishu ohev, or something like that. It's not about whoever you fall in love with. It's just that we have to make sure that people have the opportunity, the reasonable opportunity of finding a partner, and finding a lifelong partner. And for gay people, that means someone of the same sex. They have to have that opportunity. It's interesting because the Midrashim talk about Cain and Hevel, that they married their sisters, Olam Chesed Yibaneh, that in the beginning, the only opportunity they had for fulfilling Lo Tov Heyot Adam Levado was incestuous relationships, according to that Medrash. But nowadays, thank God, we're living in a world that has many people in it, and you can fulfill Lo Tov Heyot Adam Levado not with your sister. But a gay person cannot fulfill Lo Tov Heyot Adam Levado with someone from the opposite sex. Usually it's a very harmful thing. And so that's why I think they have the right. But we're not talking about sexual relations. That's a whole other discussion. So let me ask you a question, Rabbi Lopatin. Isn't it, though, a little naive to assume that when we talk about the Illinois, or that the government contemplating gay marriage, that they're talking about asexual relationships? No, I think that the question of what kind of intimacy two men can have beyond Mishkav Zachar, beyond that, is a very important question that we have to deal with. And halacha, I don't think we've spent. Well, you agree, but Lopatin, I think that the issue, at least for me, is that we can recognize that gays have an extremely challenging life under Orthodoxy and a real struggle. But to come out and support it, so for example, Ramesha Feinstein was asked, can you honor somebody who's a Baal Aveira, he was intermarried, at a shul dinner, a physician who was greatly helpful to the community? And because there's all kinds of problems. We have the Isser, the Uraim says, the Sifri, Loisach Nifem, it's an Isser Daraisa, to be Chaynef Arash. So Ramesha writes, you're allowed to honor him
is because you're not honoring the part of him that is evil. You're you're honoring the fact that he helps the tzibur, and no mention of it. But to come out with a supportive statement, here's a statement from Rabbi Ysoscher Katz, the head of halacha in Chovevei. At least that's what the way his website says. Every modern Orthodox rabbi who doesn't denounce the offensive RCA statement, the RCA objected to the Supreme Court's redefinition of marriage. He says every modern Orthodox rabbi who doesn't denounce the offensive RCA statement is either im hacharish nachrish be'es hazais revach v'atzala yamid laYehudim mimakem acher v'anu beis avinu tayved. I mean, to say that if you don't support gay marriage, you're over on him hacharish nachrish be'es hazais revach v'atzala yamid laYehudim mimakem acher. I mean, do you think Rav Moshe, who in his tshuva writes here, and it's really a Yereim, it's a Sefri, it's many, Paiskim, etc., that you're not allowed to be chayin if a Rasha or a Davara would find it a little bit, I'm searching for a word, but to say that if you don't embrace gay marriage, you're over and hacharish nacharish ke'es hazais. This is from Rabbi Ysoscher Katz. Isn't there a difference between saying, look, it's something they have to struggle with, and let's do what we can to be empathetic, etc., and something to say, let's embrace gay marriage, and if you don't, isn't that something else?
Well, I think, again, that goes back, when you're talking about the Supreme Court decision, you're going back to church-state issues. And, yes, I think if he's right, that if the Jewish community supports the church getting involved in the state and saying, we don't approve of these things because it's not our religion, then let's see issues of abortion. The Republican platform now is going to say that even in the case of rape, incest, and danger to the life of the mother, you cannot get an abortion. So we have to be very careful as Jews. We're blessed to live in this country where there's a separation of church and state, and we have to advocate for that. And yes, I think that
he's not discussing church and state. He's discussing the necessity to recognize gays. He continues. He says, "Vibrant modern Orthodoxy will write itself out of the parsha because it's not supporting gay marriage." I mean, this is not about the issue of church and state. This is an issue about recognizing that we have to realize that, LGBT is a very real, alive thing today, and if we're not sensitive to their needs, we will be out of the parsha. I think there's a difference between saying we're empathetic and saying, would you agree with that?
I agree that you would agree that also that we have to be it's a reality. We have to be sensitive to their needs, and that's really what he's saying. And I heard Rav Willard spoke was about gave a Dvar Torah after the Supreme Court decision. He said that it's moved from gay marriage has moved from mishpat to chok. That with the Supreme Court decision, he understands that American society does not see it as a mishpat, as a logical thing. So then, we have to look at our laws and our laws on sexual relations from our point of view as a chok. Very good for,
I agree. That could be true. But here's another statement by Rabbi Katz. Ben Greenfield, a student at YCT, responded to Rabbi Katz. In the modern Orthodox world, Mishkav Zacha is now mutter. Time to deal with it.
Yeah, look, I think I don't know what Rabbi Katz, but Rabbi Ben is a great student, and he's talking about attitudes that people have. He's not talking about halachic opinions. He's saying that it's very true in the younger crowd. If you ask younger people, and I know that this is not just in the modern Orthodox world, younger people don't have an issue with these things in the same way as the older generation did. It's a real change in attitude. But, we agree that we have to do what we can to help people that are gay, to be sympathetic to especially gay Orthodox, or the struggles they go through. And one way of doing it is to say we're not going to put up this fence against your companionship. You have to work it out. You have to, discuss with your posek, what are the halachot for a gay Orthodox Jew, but we're not going to put artificial mitzvot in front of you. And that's really all what's going on here.
Rabbi Lopatin, wouldn't it make sense for, as the Rosh Yeshiva of Chovevei, for you to say, listen, you can say things like Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov didn't exist. You can say that it's mutter, and because even though we could sit here and say all kinds of exegesis into what you're meaning, when you look at what they say, it's funny. As Jews, we say, this is Bibi's line. He says, the Iranians say they want to destroy us, and we have to take what they say at face value. He says, because other people have said that. I mean, but wouldn't that, and, when you look at a posek, let's take the other side of this, who said something that is a kula, and then some other Rav says, nah, he really didn't mean it. He really meant it as a chumrah. You would say, look, they wrote it. They said it. We have to accept it. So when you have so many statements, wouldn't it make sense as Rosh Yeshiva to say, if you say things like this, that when read, they are against Torah Misinai, that you're not a member of our community. If you want to explain it, my dear friend, Rabbi, so-and-so, please go ahead and do so. But we have to take your words as written. Otherwise, we don't, the same verbiage we use against, those who dislike us on the, be it Muslim, Arab, we say, look, we believe what you say. We can't say we don't believe what you say, but here we do believe what you say. I mean, don't words mean anything?
Well, words do mean a lot. We make statements, for instance, again, that the Torah Messina is non-negotiable. And, as a yeshiva, we love our Talmudim, we love our Musmachim, we want to help them. We're a family. And so we actually, we will definitely speak to a Talmud or a Musmach privately if we have strong disagreements with what they say. And we hope that, I think you're right, we have to continue to talk about our belief in Avrahom, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and the Masoret, and our Emunah, Kedosha. So we have to keep on talking about that. But, as far as going after specific individuals, we prefer to do that in a private way.
Let me land with a final question, Rabbi, because it's a quote from Dr. Erin Smokler, who's Yeshiva Smaret, Director of Spiritual Development. She makes
it's a wonderful yeshiva.
A spin-off.
It's a sister because Rav Avi wanted created it, but it's not affiliated with us. So she's an amazing teacher. Yes.
So listen to this. She writes about Akeda. It was a test for Avraham. There was a learning curve for God as well. Right?
Yeah,
it turned out that God has to learn along the way that there are actual dangers. I think that in a sense you'll forgive the irreverence here if you'll find this blasphemous, which I do. I think in a sense it was God who failed the test here. I mean, you see this as a little problematic?
Well, look, in the Chumash, if you read the Chumash, Hashem is the first one to say that Hashem has failed. Nichamti kiasitin. A lot of times, oh my goodness, it was Shaul and with, Noach, Ador Hamabul. Hashem tells us to believe that Hashem is making mistakes. Now, we understand it differently.
But when Hashem says he was Nichamti, it's one thing, but if Dr. Erin Smokler to say that God failed is a little different, especially since we say that Vakedas Yitzchak Lazare Hayayim Barachamim Tizker is how we end up, the prayer of Rosh Hashanah is, may the Akedah stand in our good stead, on Yom Hadin, and to say that God failed the test here, and that Avraham and God both failed, and don't this sound like divrei kfira to you?
No, so I love this. Hashem wants us to, really take Hashem seriously and take Avraham seriously and take these things. So she's really, I don't know if it's not my shot, it's her shot, but I think that what she's saying is she's taking the story very seriously, reading it very deeply. As far as Avraham failing, it's Mefurash in Rashi and Ramban deals with this, that Hashem says, I said Halehu, I didn't say Shachtehu. It's shot in Rashi, but I remember that Rabbi Richard wrote about this. This was 25 years ago. I was at YU in the early 90s, and he got in so much trouble they wouldn't allow him to speak in the Beis Medrash because he wrote about it. Rashi that Avraham, one stream, of course, it's a huge chus for Avraham, that his commitment to Hashem, and Kavash, Avraham Rachamav, so incredible. But there's the Rashi, there's the Medrash that he misunderstood Hashem, and Hashem never said to slaughter him.
But it doesn't say that God failed.
Yeah, this is taken to another level. I don't know what does it mean to say that, Hashem. It means that Hashem wants us to see that Hashem, didn't, succeed in his own test. It's very difficult. But it's not difficult at all. There's no, it's not one of the Yud Gimel calling that, Hashem, passed the test, or it's fascinating to see, and this is an important conversation about, the perfection of Hashem. I know other Chovevei Torah students have gotten in trouble by saying Hashem made a mistake or this and that, but, you read Tanakh and Hashem wants us to sympathize with how difficult it is running the world. He thought Shaul would be good, and then Shaul wasn't good. Of course, Hashem knew Shaul would fail, but Hashem wants us to feel that sense of failure. Hashem wants us to feel Hashem feeling failure. Okay? Hashem never fails. Hashem is perfect. Hashem knows everything and is perfect. But Hashem wants us in kiviyachol, to feel what it feels like when you're failing. And sometimes the only way to do that is for Hashem to help us get inside Hashem's mind, kiviyachol, and feel that sense of failure. Certainly with Shaul, when you read that Torah, it's painful, but you're feeling the pain of Hashem. And the Rambam would say it's also to feel Hashem doesn't have any pain. That's kfira. But, our tradition accepts that we feel the pain of Hashem. So that's what she was really saying, that, get inside of Hashem's mind at the Akedah. And what did Hashem say, likely, when that happened? And how did Hashem feel? So it's a different style. It's definitely a different style, but I think it's very consistent with a lot of Midrashim. And even
can you mention a medrash that says by that Akedah that Hashem failed?
Oh, that Hashem failed. A medrash that Hashem failed. I can't mention.
Well, I have to tell you, Rabbi Lopatin, one of the more fascinating interviews I've ever had.
Well, I take that as a deep compliment.
Yeah.
But really, and thank you so much for inviting me to this show and for having the conversation.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Have a wonderful day.
Okay.
We have on the phone with us Rabbi Avrahom Gordimer. He's a writer for Cross Currents and Farut Sheva, and he's a frequent critic of Open Orthodoxy. Welcome, Rabbi Gordimer.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
So, Rabbi Gordimer, could you tell us what, when you speak to the Rabbanim of Open Orthodoxy, they profess, a strong adherence to Torah and Hashemayim, and they see very little difference between modern Orthodoxy and themselves. What are your issues with them?
My issues, first of all, let's go to the first point. In terms of Torah and Hashemayim, it's true, I don't question the fact that at Chovevei Torah, the Yeshiva of Open Orthodoxy, I do not question the fact that they teach Torah and Hashemayim there. The problem is that many leading Open Orthodox figures, both YCT leaders, Rebbeim, as well as people affiliated with YCT and beyond that, have written extensively against Torah and Hashemayim, whether it's denying the authorship of the Torah, Torah Shabbal Peh, the objectivity of the Torah, the historical truth of the Torah. These things are coming out of those part of and affiliated with that group and that movement, despite what is claimed and I believe is taught in the school itself.
Now, when you speak to them, they respond, it's ayin panim l'Torah. They don't mean that. They did you hear the interview that we had with Rabbi Lopatin?
No, I did not hear the interview.
Okay, well, if we had an interview with Rabbi Lopatin, and he basically says there's ayin panim l'Torah. They mean it in sort of a midrashic way. They don't mean it in a serious way. They mean it metaphorically. They mean it al pi drush. But of course, they adhere to Torah and Hashemayim. And how would you respond to that?
Well, I'm not questioning their sincerity. First of all, in terms of Shivim Panim LaTorah, the Shivim Panim have to be within Torah, with technically the authority of Chachamim, the authority of the Torah. If one says, I have my own pshat, like for an example, there's some Open Orthodox rabbis who have professed various pshatim in whether Torah Shemayim, in terms of certain biblical narratives, certain mitzvahs, how to perform the mitzvahs. If a person makes up his own interpretation, as sincere as he is, if it doesn't fit into the miskeres, into the framework of Masorah, it's not included. It's not sanctioned as one of the Shivim Panim LaTorah, and that's a very big problem here. Some of Open Orthodoxy's leaders are people who have taken stands in terms of, gerus, possibly how to do changing gerus, other things, other very important things that usually the Gedolei Hador are consulted for, and we have a Masorah for. One can't just say take it into your own hands and say, I'm going to, work out my psak and gerus or work out my hashkaf and this or that. It has to be part of a Masorah. The Masorah might be broad, but it has to be part of a Masorah with authority behind it, and I think that's very lacking here often.
Can you give us a few concrete examples?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Say in terms of, going back to Tanakh and the Torah, one of the Rosh Yeshiva of Chovevei Torah has written many times very sharply critically of the Avos. Not like, say, the Ramban in a few cases. He has made a few points here and there. Usually, if you look at the Chevel, you'll see there's always a makor from earlier makor, but saying things like Avrahom Avinu was a bad father, Yaakov Avinu didn't know how to handle himself, Moshe mishandled the Korach episode entirely, Avraham failed the Akedah, things like that. I think they're just outrageous allegations against the Avos, against the Imahos, against Moshe Rabbeinu, which have really no Masorah for them and really change our whole attitude towards Torah. It's true, it's an interpretation of an Orthodox rabbi, but it doesn't mean that it's part of the Masorah and part of the acceptable interpretation and approach to Torah understanding.
Okay, could you give us some more examples?
Yeah, sure. Let's go back to the gerus case. In terms of gerus, some of the Open Orthodox rabbis took it upon themselves after a gerus, like a mikveh scandal, we probably heard about it in Washington, D.C., but they wanted to rethink the idea of the role of Beis Din during gerus. So they worked out a psak that the Beis Din does not have to be at the mikveh. They don't have to be in the room of the mikveh. Now, the way it works normally is that if it's a woman who's being tovel, the Beis Din stands very far. I've talked to many dayanim and prompted them. They stand very far away. They don't face her. They're totally opposite end of the room. A woman attends to the person, the gioris at the time, and that's it. And the Beis Din just takes a quick glance from a distance, from like 50 feet, 50 yards away, making sure that there's a submersion in the mikveh, and that's it. However, though, and that's requirement halachically. At least in the Shulchan Aruch, that's the way that's passed by Reb Moshe, by Rabbi Yosef, Reb Moshe Sternbach. Some of the Orthodox rabbis have taken upon themselves to change the gerus procedure. They wrote 2 teshuvos in which they reasoned that there's no requirement for the Beis Din to be on site. They can be in another room with the door locked in between them, and someone will notify them that the woman that did the tevilah. That's not the normative halacha. They worked it out based upon their understanding and makaros they have, but it's really not part of our masorah of how halacha is paskin. And more so, you have to turn to authority. If all the Gedolei Hador are paskining one way, whether it's or from YU, from MTJ, from Bnei Brak, wherever they are, and I'm working out because I think I have a psak, it makes sense, and I'm implementing it. We have no masorah for that. Say women rabbis. Open Orthodoxy ordains women rabbis. They have 2 yeshivas, yeshivas to ordain women rabbis. All of the Gedolim have talked about that have said you can't give smicha to a woman, whether they're posting from the RCA and YU, posting from more the yeshivish world. They've all said you can't do that. Whereas Open Orthodox says, we have a few rabbis, a few of our sages who do not measure up to anywhere near the posting who say you can't do this, and they've therefore said, we're going to give smicha to women. We're creating women rabbis. It's this unilateral maverick approach, not having a certain feeling of submission to the Masorah, that's, I think, causing a lot of these problems.
Now, give me a few other examples where you would find objectionable about because I understand the Novominsker Rebbe, etc., has really come out against them in a extremely strong verbiage. Give me a few other examples of what he would find very objectionable.
I would think, say, in terms of gay marriage. I mean, obviously, we have to. There are a lot of people. Some people have these whole same-sex tendencies. Rabbanim do discreetly, privately deal with them, work with them, help them, provide support, try to madrich them, and so forth. But Open Orthodoxy has taken another stance. Many of their leaders have come out in favor openly of gay marriage, legalizing gay marriage, and that's what the Supreme Court did. That was one thing. And not only that, but even encouraging and celebrating it. an Open Orthodox rabbi wrote that he organized an engagement party for two men together.
Which rabbi would that be?
Yeah, I probably shouldn't say he's not one of. I probably shouldn't say his the name, but it was in the papers, but it was in the online and so forth. Another one has Rabbi Avi Weiss has written how he's in an interview that he welcomes and will register in his shul men and men as gay couples. Obviously, if two people come to shul together, unmarried men, we're not going to ask questions. It's not our business and so forth. But to register people who were openly homosexual as a couple or as a family unit in a shul, that's something that's not normally ever done. But Open Orthodoxy is now doing that.
So say that again. They are openly welcoming couples. Is that what you're saying?
Right. In other words, if you have a man and a man or a woman and a woman, and they say, we are wife and wife, we are husband and husband, we are a gay couple, we openly declare ourselves as a couple, the shul will register them with a family membership or a couple membership. It's true. One thing is that some shuls will register people who maybe have this tendency as yechidim, as individuals. They don't ask questions, whatever, unmarried men, fine. But to have men come in they declare themselves as a couple, we are a gay couple, the shul register them as a membership, as a family or a couple, that's another story. That's very problematic. Some rabbis have even suggested celebrating the simchas of these families. Say they adopt a child, having a simcha in the shul, the adoption, gay men adopting children, all types of things that are totally outside of not only the Masorah, but the whole attitude of Torah and the whole attitude of Chachamim. That's really very problematic.
And what do they do with the medrash that says,
very good kasha. That I do not know. I have not posed that question. I do not know. That's a great kasha, and I don't think there's a good answer to it.
So, what do you hope to accomplish with your writing about Open Orthodoxy?
My hope really is, number one, to alert people to the problems. A lot of people say, there's an Orthodox rabbi, therefore everything must be fine. I can rely upon him as a halachic authority. People should be, prudent. They should be aware that that's not always the case, obviously, especially in this situation. Number two is my goal really is to, for those involved in this movement to really rethink their direction, their trajectory, to realize we've gotten to a point that not only, originally was started as like a non-yeshivish or less yeshivish or more left-wing version, say, of why you have reached. But it really went so far, whether in terms of the ordaining women, the gay issues, Torah Shemayim by some of the graduates, some of the leaders of this movement, changing Geirus, so many other things, interfaith, interdenominational relationships. It's gotten so far that I wish people involved there would just realize maybe we should rethink how we're going, try to realize how far we've gone out of the norm, away from normative orthodoxy. What can we do to try to, return and become part of things and just, sort of realize how far we've gotten. That's really part of my goal. It's not to attack. Some people accuse me of being, I want to attack and negativity. That's not my goal. I have no interest in that. I don't have the time to do that. That's the last thing I want to do. But to make people realize how far they have gone, they have to rethink and just, hopefully return back into the fold.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Gore. So before we close off, Rabbi Gore, and we'll edit out this piece. If you had one message, give us one message to the Rabbanim of of Open Orthodoxy, what would it be?
The message is that you should please realize where your movement has taken you, to please reconsider where you're going, the steps you've taken, and look towards either your Rebbeim or your Rebbeim's Rebbeim, and think back to the beautiful Masorah that we'd love you to come back, to return to, so we can work together as Rabbanim and Achdus.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Gordimer.
Thank you very much. Great speaking with you.
Bye-bye. Welcome to Headlines. This is Dovid Lichtenstein. This week we will be doing a continuation of our show on Open Orthodoxy. We will have Rabbi Ysoscher Katz, who's the head of department of the Halacha and Gemara at Yeshivat Chovevei Torah. I'm pronouncing it that way because I got a few phone calls that I was criticized by them for pronouncing it incorrectly. We will also have David Rosenthal, who's a Talmud of Rabbi Feldman. He wrote a book, or a sefer, called Open Orthodoxy. Is it really Orthodox? He will have a commentary on what Rabbi Katz said. We will also have Rabbi Shmuly Yanklowitz, who's one of their more famous graduates of Yeshivat Chovevei Torah. We got a lot of reaction to the last show. Many people criticized me both for having it on, additionally for not being critical enough, being too permissive. So I said originally I will let everybody judge for themselves. Before we start, okay, you can listen to us on Motzei Shabbos from 11 to 12 midnight on WMCA 570 AM or WMCA.com or on the Nachum Segal Network, and Monday morning at 11 a.m. at NachumSegal.com. You can find all our shows at headlinesbook.com under the audio or podcast section or on iTunes. And you can always call on our hotline, 732-806-8700, to listen or to make a comment. You can email any questions or comments to info@headlinesbook.com. Before we start, I would like to just say a small thought. You know, we just finished the 3 weeks Tisha B'Av, and Moshe said, and we said Eicha, and Chazal say 3 times we had Eicha. 3 said Eicha. Moshe, Yeshaya, and Yirmiyah. Moshe said, Eicha esa levadi terchachem. How can I carry such a difficult people all alone on my back? Yeshaya said, Eicha. Yirmiyah said, Eicha yashva badad, and ultimately we had Eicha nasa lezoyna kiryat mana. So there seems to be some connection between the 3. And I heard a vart from a very chashuv Rav here in Monsey. He said, Moshe said, Eicha esa levadi. How can I carry all this responsibility all by myself? Nobody's willing to pitch in. And when nobody else feels the achrayus except for 1 or 2 people, ultimately you end up with Eicha nasa lezaina and Eicha yashva badad. If we don't pitch in, if all of us don't feel that each one of us is a yachid and has an achrayus, we can't rely. This is not Christianity, where we have the infallibility of a pope. Every one of Klal Yisrael is kol adam nivra yechidi. Every one of us is an individual. Each one of us has to accept responsibility. The Gemara says, why was Yehuda Zeicha Lamalchus? Because he said, Ki avdecha orev es hanar. He pitched in. He accepted responsibility. And you know, the Mishnah of it says, Eze derech ra. What's a bad way to lead your life? Loiva ve'enei mishalem. To borrow and not to pay. I mean, of all the Taryag mitzvahs, that's the only one they could find. It's even not one of the Taryag mitzvahs. Even the whole Priyas Balchav mitzvah, Gemara says in HaKaisiv, but it's not one of the Taryag mitzvahs. Loiva ve'enei mishalem. Chaim Shmuly says, if you don't have responsibility, it's before Taryag mitzvahs. It's derech eretz kadmel Torah. He says, you're not even an Adam. If a loiva ve'enei mishalem is not an Adam, he doesn't accept responsibility. You know, I have a friend, I shouldn't say a friend, I'm honored to call him a friend. His name is George Rohr. And he's one of the biggest Balei Tzedakah in the world. And he founds yeshivas in all remote parts of the world. And I say, what's the number one thing you look for? He says, somebody who has empathy and a sense of achrayus. I said, give me an example. He said, okay. He said, I sent a fellow to Kazakhstan to start a yeshiva there. He said, and I got a call from the community, and it really made me rest. He says, because I'm looking for somebody, will they go to such a remote place and really get the job done at such mesiras nefesh? He says, the president of the community called me up and he said, they were stunned. He said, the couple, young couple in their 20s, were there for 2 weeks, and they went out, and they bought 2 places in the local Beis HaChaim, the Beis HaLabim. They bought 2 plots in the cemetery. Like Rus said to Nami, and Nami says, thanks her for a great kindness. What he says, Asher telchi elech, v'sham ekaver, I will be buried there too. That's how great my sense of achrayus is. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, how did Eicha start? You know when Eicha starts? With apathy. The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is disinterest, lack of a willingness to give a hand, to help out. Every one of us, if we love, we can't be apathetic. we have to be makabel achrayus. That is one of the great lessons of Tisha B'Av. We have on the phone with us from Yerushalayim Rabbi Ysoscher Katz, who's the head of both Gemara and Halacha in Yeshiva's Chovevei Torah. Welcome, Rabbi Katz.
Thank you.
So, Rabbi Katz, as I'm sure you're aware, Yeshiva's Chovevei Torah has made quite a lot of waves in the world, and people are, Yiddishkeit, Judaism, is always concerned with a new movement. We were concerned, I guess it goes back to Shabsi Tzvi, and we've always been concerned about, quote-unquote, the new. And Yeshiva's Chovevei Torah has come in as a new movement, etc. And there's a concern, are the halachic and hashkafic paradigms of Yeshiva's Chovevei Torah, are they in line with what is accepted with historic orthodoxy? So could you give us a little bit of your understanding of it?
Yeah, sure. I'll be very happy to do that, David. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. So I think that in a nutshell, if I wanted to describe the ethos of Chovevei Torah, Rabbi Avi Weiss, the founder of the Yeshiva, said it very well. Basically, what Rabbi Avi Weiss said is that if you look at the statistics, 10% of Jews are Orthodox, and the other 90% of Jews are not. And that's tragic, because if you are an Orthodox Jew and you believe that there's something incredibly beautiful and incredibly exciting about Orthodoxy, the fact that it appeals to only 10% of the Jewish community is, I would say, borders on the tragic, and is very sad and painful. And in a nutshell, the goal of Yeshivat Chovevei Torah is to really figure out a way to bring the beauty of Orthodoxy to the 90% of Jews who don't think that Orthodoxy has anything whatsoever to say to them. That's an incredibly exciting task, and at the same time also an incredibly challenging task. It means that you have to figure out how to kind of present what is so beautiful and so amazing to you to an audience who comes, I would perhaps say at best is apathetic to what it is that we have to offer, and at worst vehemently opposed. And that is a very difficult task. It's a very hard task, a very challenging task, because what it means then is that you have to try to figure out how to do what it takes in order to make Orthodoxy that you find so appealing, equally appealing to people who don't. And you want to do it in a way that is creative, but also authentic. And that is a very thin and very dangerous line, frankly. So if you're asking me, are we walking on a very thin line? Yes. Have we succeeded in still holding on to that line? In my opinion, absolutely. I know others disagree. But definitely, as far as I'm concerned, we've done a great job in trying to really walk that tightrope balance between making Yiddishkeit and observant Yiddishkeit appealing to people for whom it doesn't appeal to, but at the same time stay within the boundaries of what halacha and orthodoxy prescribes.
So then would it be fair to say that your message is really not then for the mainstream, but it's really more for those who are either the 90% or those among the 10% who are struggling?
Yeah, it's a good point. I actually can illustrate it to you with a story that happened with me. I suspect that before you interviewed me, you kind of looked up my background. So I'm assuming you know that I grew up in Satmar. So I very vividly remember when I was learning in Satmar Yeshiva, I was about 14 or 15 years old. And, in Satmar it's very easy to be countercultural because Satmar has a very narrowly prescribed curriculum, what you could learn, what you can't learn, even in Hasidus. Some of your listeners might be surprised that even in Sifrei Hasidus, there was a very limited, palette of what we can learn and what we can read. So, I had my rebellious moments, and one of my rebellious phases was that I decided to read Rav Tzadok HaKohen from Lublin, his Sefer Pri Tzadik, because, people would talk about, Rav Tzadik is amazing, Rav Tzadik is wonderful. And then I started reading him, and I went to my Rebbe, and I said, Rebbe, I'm not feeling it. I'm not seeing what's really such a big deal, why people are so excited. And my Rebbe had a one-liner which stayed with me forever. And my Rebbe said, Ysoscher, Rav Tzadik talks a lot about tikkun. He first has to experience the kilkul in order to appreciate the beauty of his creative tikkun, which I thought was a very beautiful line describing Rav Tzadik. I think that would be the line I would use to describe what we're doing. If you're a good, nice Orthodox yeshiva bacher in Yisrael, you should absolutely not touch anything that has to do with Chovevei Torah. Because you're in a happy place religiously, you're a happy place with Yiddishkeit, you're fine. You shouldn't be reading anything having to do with it, And I frankly think that these essays and books that are published that really, so to speak, show to the Haredi world what we're doing is so damaging to the Haredi world, especially for people who, they're fine. They're not struggling with questions in the Emunah, they're not struggling with questions of values. If you've experienced the kilkul, then we are very excited in holding hands and joining with you on this journey of trying to figure out how could we make it possible for you to still be committed to Torah, to Yiddishkeit, to Avodas Hashem, to Yer Shamayim, and so on and so forth. So, if you haven't experienced the kilkul, do not touch anything having to do with Chovevei Torah.
Rabbi Ysoscher, let me just tell you a few quotes that really get people very nervous, and maybe you could. Here's a quote from Rabbi Farber that just got people so upset. Here's one: Avrahom and Sarah are folkloristic characters. Factually speaking, they're not my ancestors or anyone else's. He's basically saying the Aves are folklore and they never existed.
And I'm saying to you that he's an Epicurus.
Wow, that's powerful. So I
now
have
here's where I would continue the conversation. The question then becomes, what does one do with someone who espouses Epicurus in the 21st century, right? And that's when the issue gets complicated. Do we apply the Chazon Ish Antinik Nishba today? Do we not apply that? Do we have to be sensitive to the fact that he represents a significant segment within the community that struggles with biblical criticism? That's where things get complicated, and when people misconstrue what our attitude is in the abstract, that this is a kfira, this is a Epicurus, you have to believe that the Torah is real and true, with what do you do once you've accepted that someone espouses heretical views?
Here's my question to you. I would like to compound that, okay?
Sure.
I don't know what the answer to that, because that's a very complex question, but let me make it even more complex. When somebody is like on the board of a yeshiva and he's in some way a representative of a yeshiva, like he's the editor of the journal, and he espouses that, it blackens the eye of the yeshiva. And he becomes, in effect, seen as a representative, as a mouthpiece. Isn't it damaging for the institution to have somebody like that, who's an editor of the journal, espousing things and not coming out and saying what you know?
Right. So,
I mean, are you doing yourself justice?
Yeah, no. So first of all, he's not the editor of. Whom are you talking about? You're talking
Rabbi
about
Zev Farber is the editor of the journal,
so,
the Keren. That's what it says on his website. That's what it says on his website, anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, he's not in any way affiliated with anything having to do with yeshiva anymore. And no, so the yeshiva, is gradually trying to kind of develop, language that ends up responding to all the different commitments and responsibilities that we have. And I totally sympathize with any Yerei Shamayim that hears Epicurus and says, when are they going to respond appropriately? And it's a legitimate sense of, of outrage and anger, which I totally agree with you and totally sympathize. But at the same time, I also sympathize with the terribly debilitating fear that my colleagues and I, and we're talking about a small staff, so this is not the big boogeyman that it sounds, it's a very small staff, the terribly debilitating fear of Oli miyotri, oli miyitzri. God forbid if we condemn Zepharver more than necessary, the consequences for the overall chances for a vibrant modern Orthodoxy, I have to qualify it, modern Orthodoxy, the consequences can be as great as not condemning him enough. And to find that really tough balance is very difficult. And I will be honest with you, David, I think that in the yeshiva, a month doesn't go by that we don't revisit the issue. Can we push the thing a little bit further? Can we kind of really go the next step? And part of it is also is to establish, so to speak, liberal credentials on the street that people would trust us enough to know that even if we come down really hard on Ikrei Emunah, we're still here to respond to people who have liberal values and want to find a place in Orthodoxy. Is it too slow? Yes, for a lot of people it's too slow. Do I resent that we're not going faster? No, I don't. Did I make the right choice? I'll only find out when I get to Shemaim in Olam Haba. I'll never know until then.
Let me ask you another question. Okay, here's a drasha given by one of the Rabbanim of Chovevei Torah, and this was on before the Illinois Senate when they were debating whether to allow gay marriage, and it was like this. It says, Rabbeinu Shalom. It says, Lo tov heyos adam levadei. Right? It's not fair for anybody to stay single and to live single. Right? The Torah doesn't want to condemn anybody to a life of living alone. There has to be an opportunity for people to live and find a lifelong partner. Right? Basically, a speech about Lo tov heyos adam levadei. So my question to you is, and based on this speech and this thing, they allowed. So my question to you is, I can understand that, we should, given where the world is today, that Orthodoxy should maybe be silent about the matter. Maybe it's like don't ask, don't tell, separation of church and state. But to come out and say that the pasuk says Lo tov heyos adam levadei is advocating for gay marriage, I mean the Marshal would say that's at Ziyuf HaTorah. Would that be incorrect?
Certainly I'm not giving you softballs of it. I don't think we have yet resolved what the role of, what is the Orthodox attitude towards the separation of church and state, right? Meaning, remember, he's talking to a American legislator that's not Orthodox, right? And the question then becomes, when you talk to an American legislator as an Orthodox rabbi, do you espouse Orthodox beliefs, or do you espouse Orthodox sensitivity? My bet to you, David, is that 95% of the people who sat there and listened to him thought, wow, these Orthodox people are not as mean and as discriminatory as I thought. He spoke so sensitively on this issue. And he created an incredible Kiddush Hashem. And at the same time, theologically, again, it comes back to my point before about who's your audience. He is not talking to the yeshiva buffet. He's talking to people who are not Jewish, or people who at least are not Shomrei Torah and Mitzvah. So he's not giving a sheer now on homosexuality, in which case he would say, how dare you mention Lo tov heyos adam levadei without talking also about the pasuk about Eva he. That's not the context, and that's I think one of the biggest.
But could you make a Kiddush Hashem by going against the Torah, by misrepresenting the intent of the Torah? Is that a Kiddush Hashem?
No, David. Nobody doubts for a minute. See, here's the thing. The problem is that we're not operating in a vacuum. Orthodox, philosophy, Orthodox belief, Orthodox values has been established, for many, many years in America. Everybody knows Orthodox Jews are committed to Torah. The question now is whether people affiliated with Chovevei can come and complement that attitude with an additional layer of sensitivity, kindness, and again, exactly what I said earlier to you. Can we do that speaking out of a Torah space and show people, look, that Torah that you always were told is primitive, is backwards, is exclusionary. Guess what? That's not the whole picture. Yeah, of course I'm an Orthodox Jew. Of course I am opposed to gay marriage from a halachic perspective, but I can still encourage the legislator to explore the sensitivity issues, because guess what? Orthodoxy doesn't only talk about halacha, it also talks about other things as well. So you see, the problem again is that the people who critique Chovevei assume Chovevei is talking to a Lakewood Yeshiva audience, to a Rav Dovid Soloveitchik's base medrash. They're not talking to them. They don't need to be told, A, that gay sex is usher, B, that the Torah is the kindest thing that ever existed. The Chovevei message is for people, like I said before, who have experienced the kilkul and need support in tikkun. So if someone goes to a legislator and says, look, I have kippah that makes me Orthodox, my shul is Orthodox, I nevertheless can come to the government and advocate sensitivity to human beings whose lifestyle I religiously find inappropriate.
But he's not saying that. But he's saying lo tov heyes adam lavad. He says the Torah Bereshis says, he says, I think it's wonderful and right. This that you're doing, and I'm advocating it. So what's the Kiddush Hashem about saying that what the Torah says is incorrect?
No. But again, David, you're bringing your yeshiva education hat to bear on a conversation outside of a yeshiva conversation context. The context is not a yeshiva conversation. It's not. He's not coming to yeshiva bachram and saying to them, "Hey guys, just chug this all, homosexuality, mishigas. Sudu apasig in the Torah v'zak lo tova yaisadam lavada." That's not who he's talking to. You are taking what he said, bringing it into the bes medrash, pretending he's talking to you and saying, he's telling me that gay sex is not usher. He wasn't talking to you. He was talking to you, to people who have their own ideas about gay sex and who themselves think that loneliness is the most devastating plague of modern Judaism, of modern life. And he comes along and says, listen, I sympathize with you. I think it's important that we should find venues for people for whom the Israel doesn't speak to nevertheless experience maximal companionship. So what's wrong with saying that? I really am not.
Because these people know that biblically it's forbidden. The Christians know that. And they still know, even when Rabbi Dullinger, this is the person you're referring to, Rabbi Barry Dullinger, even Rabbi Barry Dullinger gets up there and says, nobody thinks that Rabbi Barry Dullinger now all of a sudden rejected all of Jewish history. They know that. They know Orthodoxy is opposed to homosexuality. What they find out now is that, guess what? There are still some people who are nevertheless sensitive, even though they're Orthodox. What a beautiful Kiddush Hashem. And who advocate for it.
Who advocates for a secular government that's not bound by the Torah to really not let their fear of this get in the way of a desire to create opportunities for people to not have to be devastated by loneliness. Nobody ever
and what do you do with the Gemara that says it says that
if someone would kind of legislate based on the Gemara, I would fight tooth and nail for prohibiting gay marriage. We are not talking about a discourse that decides based things on Gemara. In my shul, if two men or two women come and say, Rabbi, would you come to... I'll tell you an honest truth. I'll be very open with you. I have a shul in Brooklyn, and there is a significant, LGBT segment in the community, and I have two women who are in a relationship, and they asked me to sign their ketubah, and I said, I used a stronger word than I'm going to use with you. I say, absolutely not. Because, lo nechshel Yisrael lachtom ketubah. Yeah, of course, Kamasa Eretz Mitzrayim. But that's the part that people miss, is that Chovevei Torah had multiple conversations with multiple audiences, recognizing that there are parts that will speak to one segment of their population, and there are parts that won't speak to the other segment of the population, and I'm not going to deny them the pieces that speak to them just because I can't give them the whole spiel. I will not get up in a legislation and say, you should know the Rambam Paskin is Nasham Amasolo Zobazo El Chayev Mitz or whatever. They're not going to listen to me, but they will still listen when I say, look, the Torah is loving, the Torah is kind, the Torah is tolerant. What a beautiful Kiddush Hashem. I really am having a hard time understanding what the problem is.
I'll tell you what the problem, I see the problem is. I don't
Please
think
help me out here, because I'm not getting it.
I'll tell you. I don't think that the Torah, I think that you're speaking the language of a person who says, I can learn in the Beis Medrash and I could go steal in the world because the Torah
I can go what?
I can go be a thief in business because the Torah is...
How did you get to this?
Let me finish. Let me finish.
Sure.
Because the Torah is relegated to the Beis Medrash, right? The Torah it's stuck into the Dalet Amis of Halacha, and when we leave the Beis Medrash, we abandon the Torah. I have a different Torah. My Torah says v'chai b'hem. We take the Torah, and that's our vision of the world. So you're saying when the Torah says it's an abomination in the Dalet Kaisle Beis Medrash. When we talk to the guy we could say, you know what, the Torah doesn't exist for you. For you, it's a wonderful thing. Chas v'shalom. That's the same psychology of guys who learn and go out and steal.
No, that's not the same psychology, because it is true that it is not something that they are commanded by, unless we go kind of depending which aspect. Of course, it's one of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach and all that.
Of course, it's one of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. Of course, it's one of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach.
No, I understand.
The Chayiv Misa for it.
Yeah, no, for sure, absolutely, for sure. But nobody's advocating them to steal. How do you make the analogy? I'm not getting the analogy at all.
He's getting up and he's saying that he's advocating for gay marriage, right? So that is encouraging to do something that the Chayiv Misa for, according to our halacha, which we're supposed to live in the street, right?
No, David. They're doing that anyway. They're not coming to us to ask the homosexuality question. They're coming to us and asking, now that I am doing this anyway, is there a way that you could help me to minimize the znus, minimize the arayas in our community, help us be stable, help us be ethical, help us be moral, help us be also do the other things that are actually not a problem. And they're not coming to us for a haskam on the homosexuality. Those people who are fighting for gay marriage are avowed homosexuals who already are engaging in homosexuality. They're not asking us that question. They're asking us, having said that, can you help me try to minimize the damage to society that rampant homosexuality causes? And my answer is yes. Yiddishkeit does have eitzes, even for those who have not embraced all of its beauty. I see it totally the opposite of it. I really don't know how you can see that.
Okay. Here's a quote, by the way, that is it's on your Facebook page, so take it for what it is, okay?
Yes. Apparently, Dovid Rosenthal not only read every post of mine, he went through every like. Apparently, he determines the value of people by how many likes they've given me on my post.
Well,
it's a lot of work. It's a big task, which I think.
Okay, here's a quote. He says, the retelling of the Exodus story is fiction. It's a record of God's conversation with fictionalized characters. Yep. Could you just give me a little color on that?
It is so perfect. Here is the thing that Dovid Rosenthal and all of those who quote my Facebook posts are missing. There's a huge din out there, a huge noise out there in the world of social media. And if you have made it a commitment to delve into that world, as I did, I like to joke with people that I have two pulpits. I have a pulpit in Prospect Heights and I have another pulpit on Facebook. And I really believe, by the way, that every Rav should be on Facebook because that's what the younger generation is. The younger generation are virtual natives. They live in the virtual world, and if you want to be in conversation with them and have much fun, then that's where you should be. In order to stand out, you need to tweak things so that people should pay attention to you, because there are billions of bits of data every time. When when Chazal say Keneged Arba Banim Dibro Torah, Echad Chacham, Echad Rashav, Echad Tam, what do? They take 4 psukim and add a story overlay, and say, oh, there are these imaginary characters that the pasuk is talking about. And that's all I'm saying. But in order for me to get your attention, as obviously I did, and in the process also the hundreds of people who read Facebook, I drop an occasional shocking and provocative line so that people should listen to me, because otherwise there's millions of other things going on there. And frankly, once you have a generous approach to my posts, which sadly a lot of the critics don't, and you take the time to think what I'm saying, you say, oh, he's just giving a little bit. Oh, Chazal say Keneged Rabbanan in the Torah. That means they've taken the parshas of the Torah and added a fictional overlay. There are fictional characters who the God is dialoguing with. Oh, Ysoscher Katz said something cool, added a little bit of a layer that we can repeat as a Devar Torah at the Shabbat table. Oh, let me listen to him tomorrow when he also tells me that we're not going to ever compromise on Kitnios, or that I'm never going to give you a heter on second day of Yom Tov, because he's my kind of guy. He kind of talks a little bit of the language that I can relate to. He uses kind of contemporary terms and says the Torah is fiction, when really it doesn't mean that the Torah is fiction. He only means that sometimes Chazal will insert fictional characters to make it exciting. Cool guy. Let me talk to him. Let me come to him next time with my Nida Shaila, which I frankly do because they trust me. So once you bring a generous orientation to my post and you don't look to cop me, you understand that the politics of Facebook is such that you have to say something provocative for people to pay attention to you. You also realize that your audience is very suspicious of you. You're the frum rabbi. Why would I come to him? He doesn't get it.
Rabbi Katz, do you think that there's a danger that Talmidim of yours or Rabbanim who will go out will not necessarily understand it with the whole amkus that you're giving it over, not alike, and Chas v'Shalom, I don't mean to compare you to, but like Mendelssohn, who had a haskama from Rabbi Kiva Eiger on the Sefer Habir, but they didn't get it, his Talmidim, right? Like, do you think that you're walking a line where when somebody talks to you, they could get it, but it gets lost in some time, like when you play telephone, and what happens is the quotes get thing, and then all you're left with is the quote without the beer, and vibes together of Chachamim Hizaru b'Divrechem.
Totally, I couldn't have said it better, David. I couldn't have said it better, and you must probably have described my Kapitel Tzilim every day. I beg the Rebbeinu Shleilim that my Talmidim should not misconstrue what I say in a way that's going to make everything I do a waste. And I'm terrified of that. I cry myself to sleep thinking of, again, nefesh mitna nefesh. I'm doing all that because I feel so strongly about how beautiful Yiddishkeit is, and I would love to bring each part of it. I tell people all the time, you know my story. I grew up in Satmar. I left Satmar. People ask me, so what happened? I said, sadly, I don't have a story for you. I had a beautiful experience in the Haredi world. I loved what I got in the Haredi world. I still love aspects of the Haredi world, obviously not everything because I couldn't stay. And I so desperately wish that people could get as much of the love for Torah, the love for Yiddishkeit. The way to do it is by doing what I do. But there's an incredible risk, as you rightfully pointed out, that not everybody's going to get it and end up saying things that are troubling and problematic. And, I'll be honest with you, it's already happened. And many times I have to go back to students and say, you don't get it. That's not what we're doing here. That's not what we're trying to do. And I'll tell my students who become rabbis, if you're going to go to a shul and you're going to bring kulas, for every kula, I want a phone call say, and by the way, Rebbe, this is the chumrah I brought to my community in exchange for that kula. But does it always work? No, it doesn't. And your example with the beer and example of, and there's so many other examples in history are so apt and so debilitating. They're terrifying. And, when I get there, I'll find out, and who knows? I hope that I'm doing the right thing. I'm trying.
No, Rabbi Katz.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and have a safe trip back.
Sure. David.
Take care. All the best. We have on the phone with us Rabbi Dovid Rosenthal, who's the author of a new book, Why Open Orthodoxy is Not Orthodox, which is available at your local bookstores as well as Amazon. He's a Talmud of Ner Yisrael, and he's received an approbation from the Rosh Yeshiva of Ner Yisrael, Rabbi Feldman. Welcome, Rabbi Rosenthal.
Thanks for having me.
So, Rabbi Rosenthal, you heard the interview with Rabbi Lopatin. Can you give me, in your words, what do you find not orthodox about Open Orthodoxy?
If I had to boil it down, it would be the belief by some, including some of the leadership, not in the classical view of the divine Torah, Torah min Shemayim, and also the view of halacha, the fact that many Open Orthodox leaders say that parts of the Torah are immoral, and they actually say that the sages corrected those immoral passages, and what naturally comes out of that is just like the sages corrected immoral passages in the Torah, that we should too, through halacha, correct what they view that the sages did that was immoral. So those would be the two major things that I had to sum it up.
Can you give me a few examples?
Well, one example would be the head of the Talmud department says the mitzvah of sota is capricious and patriarchal, and he says that Chazal looked at that mitzvah and they made it more sensitive to their sensibilities, to make it more moral, if you will. In a straightforward statement, one of the Open Orthodox rabbi said there are parts of Torah that are ethically problematic. Another Open Orthodox rabbi said that.
Go slowly.
I'm sorry.
When you talk about the head of the Talmud department, you're talking about Rabbi Ysoscher Katz, I understand, right?
Right.
And he said that the Saita was immoral the way the Torah wrote it?
Oh, his wording was it was capricious and patriarchal, and he viewed Chazal as coming along and making it more egalitarian, maybe meaning more favorable to women. So just the problem with that view is that
next case.
There was another rabbi who said that the machshei philosophy, the commandment to kill a witch, is immoral, and he cites the Salem witch trials as evidence that it's immoral to kill witches.
And who was that?
That was Rabbi Zev Farber.
Okay.
And a constant, something under attack is by the Rosh Yeshiva is the mitzvah to destroy a molek. The way he says it, I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but it's in the book, that the rabbis saw the mitzvah of a molek as problematic, so they did what they could to make it not apply so much anymore. And he says that we have not erased the molek, but the mitzvah to destroy them. So I actually think you see a lot from that statement. You see that the possibility that mitzvahs can be taken away, which is against the Rambam's, I think, 9 thicker. And also that Chazal looked at the Torah through their own sense of morality and revised the Torah how they saw fit. And again, the natural extension of that is if we look at halacha and see something which is immoral, we should do the same thing. But there's many such examples in the book. I obviously can't remember them all on top of my head right now. But the point is that it's being said by the leadership also, not just fringe rabbis. And the fringe rabbis who do say it, well, they claim they're the rabbis on the edge. Why hasn't the leadership of YCT come out and said and condemned what they're saying if they truly have a problem with it? That would be my question.
Now, Rabbi Rosenthal, what would you respond, though, to a college boy who doesn't understand the mitzvah of Machiyas HaMolek?
Well, I would say that these Jewish people believe that God gave the Torah. That's the first step, is to see if you're working with the same the same starting point. That Hashem gave the Torah, and once you believe that there is a God and that He gave a Torah, the ultimate arbiter of morality is God. And if God says something is moral, by definition it's moral. How can something be immoral that is commanded by God, the arbiter of morality and goodness? And while we might not understand why it's moral based on our values, that's the job of a Jew, is to struggle and to understand the commandments.
I understand, but if the same college boy asked you if genocide is moral because God commanded it, so then if an Arab says genocide is moral because their God commanded it, would we see what they're doing as immoral?
Yes, I actually asked one of my Rebbeim that question once, and he responded, the ultimate answer is because we believe we're right. We believe that God gave us the Torah, and this is what He said. And, the Arab might think that he's right, or the Muslim might think that he's right who believes in those things. But in the end of the day, we believe that he is incorrect.
Can you give me another example of where you struggle with Open Orthodoxy? I know you've spent a lot of... How long did it take you to write the book?
About a year.
Wow. And I imagine you spent a lot of time on the internet, etc., researching it.
Yeah, I spent a long time looking at their writings online. I read a lot of their tshuvas. I listened to a lot of their shiurim. I drive back and forth between New Jersey and Maryland a lot, so I listened to their shiurim when I would drive. And I think actually, this is just me personally, something that bothers me, is that when you read their responsa, they're filled with I won't say filled. They have very common that there's mistranslations and they're selectively quoting sources to advance an agenda. And I think that just goes in with the mindset that the ends justify the means, that I view Chazal, I view the halacha as problematic, so I'll use whatever means necessary to change that. And the reason that bothers me so much is because I'm from a community where not everyone was privileged to have a yeshiva education. And, they would read these chuvas and not know the difference. And that's something that bothers me because I think it's, in a way, taking advantage of the less learned.
So give me an example of a tshuva where you think it was sort of the verbiage was misappropriated or mistranslated to reach an end that was unintended.
Sure. One tshuva was written by the Rosh HaYeshiva where he says it's a Kiddush Hashem to give money to help rebuild a church. So obviously that's a deviation from what most of us would get.
A Kiddush Hashem to rebuild a church?
To give money to help rebuild the church, right. It's in chapter 3 of the book.
Okay.
So, I think besides the fact that most poskim and most normative halacha would disagree with that concept, what really bothered me was that he quoted a tshuva from Rav Moshe Feinstein. He said, relatedly, Rav Moshe says that it's okay
but I think Rav Moshe talks about an architect who has a living. Exactly.
So what he does, he quotes that tshuva, that responsum, and he says that, relatedly, Rav Moshe says it's okay to serve as an architect for a church. So the layman reading that would say, it seemed the implication given is that Rav Moshe would also be in favor of giving money to a church. That's the clear implication of the responsa. But if you look in the tshuva inside, Rav Moshe says it's a davar mechur, meaning it's an improper thing to do. He says that it's only when there's ava, hatred, and also, or he says, I think, when a person needs a parnasa or there'll be a hefsid. That all Rabbi Linzer left out. In addition, Rabbi Linzer left out that Rav Moshe in another tshuva explicitly says it's prohibited to give money to a church. So he's quoting half of a tshuva of Rav Moshe without Rav Moshe's limitations and ignoring another tshuva. And the layman reading this, that wasn't privileged to learn in yeshiva, he doesn't know all of Rav Moshe's tshuvas. He's not going to know this, and I think that's not so great to be misleading people like that.
And you don't think Rabbi Linzer meant that the Kiddush Hashem is because of Ava?
Doesn't sound like that. Everyone's invited to read it themselves and decide for themselves, but doesn't sound like that at all when you look at it.
So give us another example of where a tshuva was, in your opinion, misuse of halacha.
Well, there's another Rabbi Katz. This is actually the head of the Talmud department. He says it's okay for a lady to nurse in shul and reveal herself. And he bases this on, if you read the tshuva, it's 40 pages long. It's in English and in Hebrew. And there were many, many things in there that were very interesting. But one thing that struck me was that he actually mistranslates a rush in brachos. The rush is talking about how a moel, when he's performing the circumcision, can make a bracha on the bris, on the birchas hamila, because there's an erva in front of him. So what he says is that ba'oso shah, meaning at that moment the moel is involved in the mila and he can make a bracha even though the baby's his nakedness is revealed. That's one answer of the rush. So what Rabbi Katz does is he takes that rush and he translates it as saying, any time an erva is revealed for a brief moment, there's no problem of saying holy words. Nowhere does the rush say, if the baby is uncovered for a brief moment, that's the reason why it's okay. He literally just invented it out of thin air. It's just a total mistranslation of Hebrew. And on that rush, he bases his whole response as saying that when a lady reveals her nakedness in shul, even in front of men, that's not a problem because it's only being revealed for a brief moment. And everything's cited in the book. Don't take my word for it. Look it up yourself, and I think you'll reach the same conclusion I did.
So, if you had to convey a message to the Rabbanim of Chovevei Torah, or to the modern Orthodox listeners, and I imagine there will be many, what would it be?
To the modern Orthodox listeners, I would say that don't think that Open Orthodoxy is just a left-wing version of modern Orthodoxy. It's really not. It's really going beyond the pale. It's more similar now to conservative Judaism, and I think that's a mistake many people make, and it's really why we wrote the book, is because people are viewing Open Orthodoxy as just left-wing modern Orthodoxy, but it's really not.
And if you had to give a message to the students or the Rabbanim of Chovevei, what would it be?
I would just be interested. I mean, thus far, nobody associated with Chovevei has responded to any specific argument in the book. So I would actually be very interested to hear what they have to say, because I can't explain it. I mean,
you heard Rabbi Lopatin's interview. Was there anything in it that explained anything?
Not at all.
Do you think that their intent is their heart is in the right place?
I obviously don't know what's going in someone's heart. Only Hashem knows that. But my impression is that many of them definitely, mean the right thing. And I think actually a lot of people might have gone to Chovevei instead of YU or some other place and not knowing exactly what the leaders are teaching, what the leaders are preaching there. But I think now that hopefully with this book they'll be aware of that and maybe choose other institutions like Yeshiva University or other places, other places to go to.
Well, thank you very much. The book is by Rabbi David Rosenthal. It's called Why Open Orthodoxy is Not Orthodox. It's available in your local bookstore, Sfarim store, or on Amazon. And you can read the book, listen to Rabbi Lopatin's interview, and decide, did he respond or didn't he? Thank you very much, Rabbi Rosenthal.
Thanks for having me.
We have on the phone with us Rabbi Shmuly Yanklowitz, who is the Musmach of Yeshiva's Chovevei Torah. He received the second smicha from Rabbi Shlomo Riskind, and a third one from Rabbi Nassim Lopez Cardozo. He earned a master's degree of Harvard University in leadership and psychology, as well as a degree of philosophy from Yeshiva University. Welcome, Rabbi Yanklowitz.
Thank you so much.
So, Rabbi Yanklowitz, you're very involved with Yeshiva Chovevei Torah, and sort of, I would say, an outspoken, member of their creed, right, of Open Orthodoxy. Could you give our listeners your opinion of what it represents?
Sure. So, not all graduates of YCT consider themselves Open Orthodox. It's a term that I myself embrace, that Rabbi Weiss has embraced, but many of the graduates merely call themselves Modern Orthodox. But within this school and within this ideology, the idea is that Torah is to be learned rigorously and committed to rigorously. The traditional learning, Micha, of halacha with kashrus and nida and Shabbos, in addition to all the other stuff. But that also we should have a more open perspective on how we engage with all of these issues. When it comes to women's issues, more open to the possibility of leadership. When it comes to interdenominational issues, more open to engagement. Interfaith issues, more open to engagement. Understanding the halacha, more open to various sources that have existed, rather than just holding by one sort of more mainstream source. And so Chovevei has a very big range of musmachim that come out and their ideologies, and I think that's part of the openness, is that we want guys from the right, we want guys from the left as well.
So, do you see Chovevei or the new Open Orthodoxy as changing halacha in any way?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, is it more of a hashkafa, or does it actually affect, view of the Shulchan Aruch?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Chovevei is definitely not a proponent of changing halacha. I think that there will be new positions which will seem different from mainstream orthodoxy today, but that's not a change in the halacha, but merely holding by the Aruch HaShulchan as opposed to the Mishnah Brura or something like this. And so no one in the yeshiva, certainly the faculty and the students or the graduates, talks about changing halacha or uprooting halacha, God forbid, but rather accessing the full beauty and full potential of halacha.
So let me ask you a few questions on where it could be a little difficult to balance these. I know that members of Chovevei, and I think yourself included, have come out in support of gay marriage. Now, notwithstanding the belief that many hold that we should separate church and state, right, and really religion should not get involved in gay marriage and should be silent about it. But to support gay marriage, isn't that a violation of the halacha of the Issa Torah of Ysoscher im Ish Mishkevei Isha? And additionally, isn't that very problematic with the Gemara that says Lecharva Olam Ad Shekasvu Ksu Bal Ish, that the reason for the Mabul was when they started allowing gay marriage? Like, how would you juxtapose gay marriage with those two both halachic and hashkafic issues?
It's a very important issue in our time, and I think the first complication is that we have to balance preserving the halacha and the broader values around the halacha, at the same time making sure we're making a Kiddush Hashem in public. And so as times change, the way we talk about Torah, I think publicly has to change as well, so that we are not considered sort of a backwards group who doesn't represent values that are important in the 21st century, but rather how halacha still matters and that Torah is something that enhances kavod habrios. And so no one in the Chovevei world is saying the Isser in the Torah is gone, right? That there's no longer an Isser. Chas v'shalom. I mean, everyone knows and agrees there's an Isser, but also says, okay, where there's not an Isur, then how do we ensure inclusivity? And that's kind of the essence of what Open Orthodox is trying to do. Where there's an Isser, we embrace that, but where there's not, then how can we be more inclusive? And so on this particular point, the point of, should secular governments embrace a secular institution of something that's called gay marriage? The verdict is out, and Americans overall feel that it is discrimination to prevent men from marrying each other, women from marrying each other. And in my view, it would be a chilul Hashem to come out publicly opposed to that, trying to use Torah to block people from actualizing what they view as their life potential. Now, I also in no way view coming out in favor of secular gay marriage as in any way in contradiction with supporting the Isser in the Torah.
And why isn't that? Isn't that basically saying that something, we're supporting something? If somebody were to support, adultery, would you see that as a problem?
Of course. Well, adultery is a major societal problem today, and I think we should all come out against it. My
point is, when we support something that's neged the Torah on a public forum, why wouldn't you see that problematic?
Okay, because I think marriage is something very different than bia, meaning bia is a sexual act, right? Just like adultery is a sexual act that's an isser. Marriage is a relationship. And here we're saying, and let me speak about my marriage for a moment. My marriage is much more than a sexual act. It's a partnership. It's raising children. It's building home. It's doing tzedakah. It's doing masim tovim. So when we're talking about a relationship, we're dealing with a whole life, right? It's true. There's a masa bia in there. There's an act of sexual relations that's may be included or is included in that relationship. But to define a whole relationship by that act would be a big problem. Yes,
but Rabbi Yanklowitz, but we have a Gemara. The Gemara says Lecharva Olam Ad Shekasvu Shtar Al Hazachar, which means this very act, writing a marriage contract between two men was the cause of the Mabul. Isn't that problematic coming out in support of that very act?
Well, so I would say two things, and by the way, I really appreciate you bringing up this conversation and bringing it up in such a respectful way. I think there's a lot of heated emotions that emerge on this issue today, and I think that we've become in many ways unable to kind of bridge the divide in societal conversation. And so I would say two things. First, I think we're dealing with a shtar as a religious document. I think we're dealing with the notion of if someone's saying I'm going to write a ksuva, for gay marriage, I think that we're talking about something very different than talking about, living in a society where that's done and not wanting to use Torah to prevent that. The second I would say is that there's, as with all halacha and the evolution of Jewish values, there's always a tension between multiple values and halachas, and we have to learn how to balance those. And so too here, we know, for example, there's a pikuach nefesh issue. We know today that there's a much higher rate of suicide among the gay community, and that the more we do to shun that community, the more at risk we put them. And so we're never putting a stamp on something saying, have sexual relations. We're clear about the Ysoscher. But we also want to say what is necessary in society today to have a healthy relationship to make sure people are safe, right? And we're not officiating at these marriages. We're merely saying that in secular politics, right, there's something that they call marriage, which is not what we understand to even be marriage, and we're not going to stand in the way of that.
Let me ask you, there's numerous statements in the press that have gotten people's, cankles up. Let me, give you a few. Here are from some, Rabbanim in YCT, and I know that, you didn't make them, but maybe you could help us. Avrahom Avinu is a folklore character, right? He never had children, and none of us are his grandchildren. Can you understand why people in sort of the quote-unquote Haredi camp get very upset when they hear this?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that there's been a graduate who's raised issues that have put the Chovevei graduates together on whether we believe in Torah Min Hashemayim, and I think I could understand why someone would read that and feel quite concerned.
So, wouldn't you think that it would be very helpful and healing if the Chovevei camp would sort of come out with a statement? I mean, we do have a concept of, the Gemara in Tainus and Chagiga. The Gemara says that Acher, Zarka by Divrei Minas, and Reb Meir was severely criticized for learning his Torah, for sort of closing ranks and saying, if you say things that are, if you scream fire in the synagogue, you're just not going to be accepted because you do damage to our community being the YCT community. Wouldn't it be helpful as a community if you read these few people the riot act and said, you're damaging us and we will not accept you, and you are the acher in our community where you're just not accepted?
Yeah. I totally understand that point, and from my perspective, Torah Min Hashemayim is like the ikar of Torah. It's like the very starting place is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the Torah, and we're obligated and bound by Torah. Like that for me is a starting place, and I'm very uncomfortable with anyone challenging or jeopardizing that commitment. And for me, that's at the center of Torah for me, and ought to be at the center of all Torah discourse, is the sense that this is not just an activity, this is not just another religion, this is really Torah Min Hashemayim. And I think that commitment is pervasive in the Chovevei camp, an absolute commitment to that. And with a graduate who's been outspoken about believing in some form of Torah Sinai, Torah Min Hashemayim, but also raising concerns like that quote you just rose, has made many very uncomfortable. And to be honest, I think the movement's too young to really understand how to kind of grapple with all of this yet, kind of what is out of bounds. Because I think that the current commitment is to say, look, there's a lot of people who call themselves Orthodox today who have questions about Torah Min Hashemayim. And in my personal view, we should bring them closer to that. But the view is, why alienate those people more by telling them if they have questions or if they have doubts, they're now outside of the camp. And so Chovevei has put out a number of statements, to my understanding, making clear this commitment. But you're right, it hasn't come out and said, if you challenge this, you're outside. And I think part of the concern is alienating other Jews who have questions and feel like they're staying within halakha, but feel pushed out in some way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time.
All the best. Take care. Bye-bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.